talking to Vera McNiece and her daughter Jean at the Hastings House Apartments, 765 North Broadway, apartment 16E. We noticed that my name, Phyllis Harnack, was not on the original, and the date is June 24th, 1979. We're going to be talking using a questionnaire that we made up for the Centennial exhibit that's coming up in October, just sort of as a framework to talk from. So let's see. I've got the question here near now. Is it all right for you for me to go ahead? The first question is, do you have any recollections of parents or grandparents who lived in Hastings during the 1875 to 1885 era?
Yes.
And who were they?
My grandmother, Curry, and the rest of the Curry family, all of her family, and her father and mother, grandfather and grandmother Lane.
So those were your great-grandparents?
They were my great-grandparents, yes.
So while we're talking right now, would it embarrass you to say how old you are?
Not at all. 85.
85.
Yeah.
And tell me about the Lanes. Those were your great-grandparents?
Well, they lived in New York at 28 33rd Street, West 33rd Street.
Right.
And it was a little house that belonged to my grandmother's father. And when she married Mr. Curry, he came there and lived, and that's where she had her family. They all lived together there.
I see. And then came to Hastings?
In 1865.
Now this is the Currys.
The Currys, and the Lanes came with them.
Oh, they all came
the
together.
Grandfather, great-grandfather, my great-grandfather and great-grandmother came with them.
Could you give me their first names?
Louis and Familia.
And then who else was in the group that came to Hastings?
There was Frank Curry, Elizabeth, that's my father.
Right.
Sarah Elizabeth Curry, Henry Curry, and Frederick Curry.
And tell me who they are now.
They're all Grandma Curry's children.
So they were your aunts and uncles.
And my father.
And your
Frank
father.
Curry.
And where did they come to in Hastings?
Right where we lived then, Tompkins Avenue.
The yellow farmhouse.
Yes, that's right.
What's the number of that?
Well, it was 219, but somebody has bought it and made another entrance. Whether it's still 219, I believe it is.
Right.
Tompkins Avenue, Hastings.
All right, now I'm going to stop for just a minute and replay a little bit of this to see if we're getting it, all right?
And Curry. Louis.
No, grandfather.
Oh, my grandfather, Francis.
I see.
Francis Moore Curry, Francis M. Curry.
I see. Now, originally, where did those people come from when they were in New York?
Francis M. Curry came from Peekskill. And as near as I can make out, my grandmother came from New Brunswick.
I see. A lot of New Jersey.
It must have been.
Because a lot of people came down from Nova Scotia.
Well, now that's just where I'm not sure.
Yeah, because
I had a little notebook of hers, and she said, "My station is New Brunswick," and that's all it said.
Station.
My station, so that's where she came from.
Yeah, so that sounds almost English, which would be.
Yeah. Well, the Currys originally were English.
Right, I see.
She was a Lane, yeah.
Yeah. So, what was their reason for coming to Hastings?
Oh, my dear, there's so many reasons. I'm afraid I'd tire you out. The main reason, I believe, was to get the children out of New York City. And then there was that draft riot in 1863.
Oh, that was the Civil War.
And that was a dreadful thing. And my grandmother told me that they had everything packed up in barrels, ready to go someplace. She didn't know where. They had to go someplace.
Right.
And I think that's what began a search for another home. But that was 63, and they didn't move to 65. So they were all that time finding a place to go. And moreover, the family had become so much larger. They had to have a larger place.
Right. The draft riots were in New York City. Tell me a little bit about those.
Well, Grandma told me this.
Yeah.
She had a colored woman that it was between the blacks and the Irish. That's who it was. And she said it wasn't a very elegant way to put it, but she said they were stringing them up on lampposts. It was terrible.
Really?
Killing each other in the streets. It was terrible. and her washwoman came to her, and at that time they had this is funny, a woodshed in the backyard and a pump in the backyard. And she said, "Oh, Missy, Missy, hide me." So my grandmother said, "I know, but if I do, they'll burn my house down." "All right," she says, "go on and keep quiet." So she got away with it.
I see.
And but she
Why were they stringing up the blacks?
It was the resentment of the Irish.
the Irish.
You see, people were buying their way out. People were doing it to buy your way out. So, you paid for substitute who were going for you, but they didn't have the money. The Irish were doing this. They had the money to do this. And they so resented them. They were drafted. They so resented it. And this new draft was going through in 63. And as they were drawing the draft names out, they began to riot. And of course,
To say they wouldn't go.
They wouldn't
That's
go.
right.
They were so furious because they couldn't buy their way out. They had no choice. So they were there.
And because the war was being fought over the
Yeah, it was
Negroes,
very,
too.
very mess. And for 4 days, mess. It was rampage.
Oh, they said it was a dreadful thing.
It was
Dreadful.
You had to
And
pull out the guard, and in one case, they say it really affected part of after Gettysburg had just taken place. Get about Gettysburg, and he was going to follow that up. He didn't get reinforcements because the reinforcements were coming in on Northern Artillery before they went. So it was really very
But it must have been
Yes,
a
and we
dreadful
haven't
thing.
heard much about that at
No,
all, have we?
I would never know a thing about it if she hadn't talked about it. And I heard it from both her and my aunt.
Right.
And she said she'll never forget those barrels being everything taken and put in these barrels. She says, I haven't the slightest idea where we were going.
And then they found Hastings somehow.
I'll tell you how. He was, my grandfather, Francis Curry, was very interested in real estate. And he'd go to these auctions of property, and he'd buy it at an auction, and then he'd sell it and make quite a little on it. And that's how he bought this place. It was
I see.
advertised in New York.
Do you know who owned it before?
Well, there was somebody, Pignolay I don't know the exact name, but the Pignolays were mixed up in it some way. It was some sort of an estate.
I see.
Yeah.
And so that farmhouse was not when you say an estate, what do you mean by an estate? That,
Oh,
The,
he stayed the Pignolay family.
the Pignolay
and
family,
the farmhouse
whatever
was
was
one of the
left.
things that was on there.
Yeah.
I see.
And so,
And
Has it been documented how old that house is? I think we have documented it.
I think, I'll tell you, you know who, I don't even know maybe who bought it, or if she's active enough in Hastings. Sandra Short.
I see. I'm sure they've done. They've
Yeah, and
worked
she's
on
been
it.
over to White Plains several times. I haven't seen her in quite a while now because I've had this eye trouble and I haven't asked her over lately because I didn't feel so hot.
Right.
But I think she's been over to White Plains with somebody else, and I think she's trying to trace it back.
I see.
You see, my family was perfectly satisfied to live there. They didn't care who,
Yeah, that's
who
right.
had it before. They were happy there, and that's all there was
When they
to it.
moved in, was it a farm? An active farm?
I think not. I think they always thought it had been some kind of a hotel, a Swiss hotel. And
see.
I said, well, how the heck did they get there? Well, the only way they could get there was a horse and carriage or a horse and wagon. And
Tompkins Avenue was
Yes.
one of the main roads
Yeah.
that went east and west in
Yes.
Westchester County.
crossroad.
So
Yeah.
it could have been a country inn. Do you think?
And
it could have been.
it could have been, yes. And
But
then
not a
up,
farmhouse. Everybody thinks of it as a farmhouse.
well, it may have been.
Oh.
You see, it was a farmhouse from the time my folks bought it.
That's what I wondered. I mean,
Yeah.
they farmed it.
They farmed. My grandfather had the boys farm it and had men farm it. He never touched it.
He liked that kind of
He didn't want to
He
get
was too busy looking all over Yonkers and Hastings buying property.
I
He bought
see.
up the front and back of Frazier's there. He bought in Yonkers, and I've got it all, the whole business.
I see. Oh, good. And
But
It's documented.
he was too busy buying property and waiting till it went up.
mhm.
He owned something on 59th Street, right where the Plaza Hotel is now.
Oh, my.
You can imagine, but he couldn't keep. Taxes kept going up, you see, he had to sell it. But he made a lot on it.
Yes, right. So he was an entrepreneur, I guess you'd say.
I'll tell you, he came. Oh, this is the
That is
thing
not
that had
now,
his
is it?
clothes in. When
Turn
he,
that off. Is it
No, it's on.
That's the one. No, they don't just like this.
Oh, come on now. Listen, that's the sort of thing that everybody's interested in. I very proudly claim that my father's
Yeah.
family were land pirates at one time. He used to wreck boats on purpose
Yeah.
to strip them. outside of
Say.
Boston Harbor. I mean, that's all part of history. Hope none of the blood comes down. But well, anyway, let's get back to your family.
Well,
This was the Curry family now.
Well, they, as I say, they lived in Peekskill. Now, they said there were 13 boys.
Mhm.
That's terrible, 13 boys.
And no girls.
And no girls.
Mhm.
And he refused to work on the farm, my grandfather. He didn't like any part of it. So he packed his things in this little thing and came to New York.
This little thing is a little suitcase.
Like a little trunk,
About
yeah.
18 inches long
Yeah.
and 8 inches
So he didn't
wide
have very
and about
much.
8 inches deep, I'd say.
Yeah. And,
The initials MFC.
yeah,
I
Francis,
see 'em.
Francis
see.
Moore Curry.
And so he took his clothes and went
Yeah.
from Peekskill to
From
New York.
Peekskill to New York.
Right.
And Jean found his name down the library where he worked in the customs house.
Oh,
Your
that's,
customs house.
that's nice.
I don't know what he did. They
Yeah.
pushed a truck or what he did. I don't know.
Right.
But he did get work right away and apparently worked himself up.
Mhm.
Then at a later time, he went in the grain and food business down on South Street.
By the South
And
Street.
made quite a little
Right.
success there.
I see.
But in the moving, there was this very funny incident. I don't know whether you want me to go
Yes,
into it
of
or
course.
not. Well, they
Tell them how they came up on the
they took the things over to the docks and put them on the sloop
Now, where is this? In Peekskill?
in New York.
In New York.
And
Oh, when they
yeah,
moved
they
out of
moved
the
up
house
here,
to come
yes.
to Hastings.
and Captain Hillman brought them up to Hastings.
Mhm.
And when they got to Hastings, Mr. John Culver, the old Culver family, very old
Yes,
family
I
in
was talking to
Hastings.
Florence yesterday.
Yeah, and very nice family. And he met the boat at the dock with a pair of oxen and a wagon. They had bought new carpeting and new furniture because this house was so much bigger. So when they got over to Tompkins Avenue, they backed this thing up to the porch and were taking the things in the house. And the bee stung one of the oxen, and they ran off way down in the apple orchard with all the furniture falling off.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, there were 3 boys, you can imagine. Well, they thought that was the biggest fun ever. They laughed and thought so, and grandmother stood there and shed tears.
Of course.
Well, they finally, I've heard him tell that story so many, and every time he got a laugh out of it. He could always see it, and his 2 brothers, of course, were just as bad as he was. But that was the incident he will never forget.
Oh,
He never
yes.
forgot.
What an auspicious beginning to their
Yeah.
residence over there.
But
So
they
then-
all loved it there, though.
Oh, yes, it was quite rural, I would think.
Oh, she was discouraged.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
she
wasn't a road coming up from Yonkers at that point, I don't think. Never
Oh,
had.
well, it didn't come all the way.
Yeah,
It didn't come all the way.
right.
But, of course, Tompkins Avenue was named after my mother's folks.
Oh, I didn't know that.
My grandmother had a hotel over there
Where was that?
on the corner of Sawmill River Road and Tompkins, the other side of Sawmill River Road.
I see, over on,
Tompkins Hotel, yeah.
on Sawmill River
Yeah.
Road, yeah.
But that had much
Oh.
to do with the Currys.
I
of
think we
course.
do have a picture of that. Tompkins Hotel?
We might have it.
We might have it. I'm not sure, I hope
Yeah.
for that. That was your mother's family. She
Yes.
was a Tompkins.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about them? How did they happen to be in Hastings?
Well, my grandmother Tompkins came from Pleasantville, and finally was married in Ardsley to a man named Nathaniel Tompkins. Now, how they came to come down to Hastings, I don't know, but I know she ran this hotel. So he didn't know much about it.
It's
She ran it.
possible the business was for sale and they bought it.
It may have been.
Mhm.
And they had some of the men that were planning the Putnam Railroad stayed with them.
I see. Oh, so the railroad the Putnam
They
wasn't
were,
in then.
they were getting ready to put it in.
I see. About when was that?
Do you know, Jean? I have no idea.
Well,
I know my father was a young man or a young boy, and he used to help with
And
surveyors.
he was born in 1859, my grandfather, so if he had worked as a boy on the Putnam, he must have been somewhere in 1960.
Yeah, right.
That's where he made his first dollar, silver dollar.
Oh, yeah.
And he kept it and gave it to Jean.
Oh, you
Maybe
have
in the
it?
mid-70s, because, somewhere up there, but, because he pretty good for the 16-year-old greatest help for us.
Right.
That's what was when you sit down with the old children.
Yeah, when they dug up for the
people got diseases.
Putnam area, they
And yeah, because the stream was there, lots of mosquitoes.
and there was quite a lot of illness at that time.
So actually, her hotel was partly a dispensary or
It probably
yeah,
was.
right. Well, so your father, is that how your father met your mother?
They were children, yeah. They
Yeah.
met as children,
My
yeah.
goodness.
You see, then when the Currys came up here, my grandfather was more or less, he was all for education because he didn't have much of it himself. And he had a young teacher come up, and she had her board and her living and some, I imagine, small pay, and car fare back and forth on railroad to see her folks for teaching the children.
I
Three
see.
children.
Just in that family, a
Yeah,
tutor.
well, some of the others came
I see.
because my mother went.
Uh-huh.
I suppose there was some little, I don't know, was
Yeah.
any charge in that. I never heard that.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. The public schools here weren't
No.
founded then.
And then, of course, there was a question. See, part of the houses in Yonkers and part is in Hastings.
Oh.
And some of them started going to Hastings school and they got put out. They had to go to Yonkers school.
Oh.
They often laugh about that.
That was,
So my father graduated from number 6 school in Yonkers.
I see. And
But
your
he-
mother graduated too, or?
From I guess she just is at number 1 school. And she didn't go too long because she had an infection in her arm. She was a very sick woman. What do they call that disease? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you spoke in one question was about the doctors.
Yes.
Well, there was a Dr. Cooley and a Dr. Ives. And she went to Dr. Ives about her arm. He said the arm might have to be amputated. So Captain Hillman knew a Dr. Gashai who lived up where Longview Hotel. It was his years before that ever came into being. And so Captain Hillman took my mother up there. And he was more or less of a surgeon and practiced in New York, apparently. And he was very German. He says, any man but says that arm comes off is a fool.
Ah.
He operated, and she was better. The only thing is, she could use her arm, but she couldn't bend it. But can you imagine?
Oh, he
Wasn't
took
that
the bone
wonderful
out.
in those days?
Well, I would say so. He took her into New York to the hospital.
No,
No?
he did it up here.
In his home, or?
Up in his home.
I see. And probably did a lot of, no, I not being a local doctor, probably didn't do too much surgery, but,
No, I think most of it was in New York.
yeah. Now, the other doctors, where were their,
They were somewhere here in Hastings, Dr. Ives and Dr. Cooley, but I don't
Okay.
know a thing about them, only heard their names.
yeah. Was there any hospital at all
No.
in Dobbs Ferry?
The first hospital I remember around here, there was in Yonkers, there was the general. At that time it was called the maternity hospital.
Yeah.
How
And
long was that before you?
I don't know when the St. Joseph's came there. That may have been there before. I'm not clear on that at all.
Right, that looks like a very old building,
Yeah.
St. Joseph.
And then the next thing was Dobbs Ferry,
The Dobbs
the
Ferry
nearest
Hospital.
one to us.
Yes, right. So, your mother and father met as children going to school, and then when they married, did they stay in the... Did you live all of your life in that house on Hudson?
Except 2 years when we moved to Michigan.
I
We
see.
were
So
there.
so when they married, your mother moved in
Yeah, over there. Yeah.
over there.
Mhm.
But that's what you call the big family way of living. It doesn't
That's
happen
right.
like that.
And it was, too.
Yes, right.
See, there was my mother, my father, and my aunt, and my grandmother, and myself.
Yes. So then you were born now, what year was that?
1894
1894,
in the house there.
in the house there. And lived there until...
And Dr. Hasbrook up in Dobbs Ferry was supposed to, he was another local doctor. He was supposed to be there, but he didn't quite make it.
So you were was there a midwife there?
No,
Was it?
my aunt was studying medicine
Ah,
in New York. And she didn't graduate till the following June, but she had to take over and bring me into the world.
It's a real
I didn't
experience.
even do that right.
So anyway, children were born at home in those days, and But did you know were there midwives in Hastings?
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
There must have been.
Right.
But in those days, you had a doctor or else. At
Yeah.
least in our particular, life, you might say. People in our circumstances. I don't mean rich people. I mean people that were comfortable.
Right.
And if you could get a good doctor, you got the doctor.
Right. But otherwise, you prescribed your own home remedies and.
Very much. This is what is very difficult for me here. I cannot understand why every little thing, there's the doctor or the hospital. And we took care of so many things ourselves.
Right.
And we came out all right.
On the whole.
Yeah, most of the time, yes.
Yeah.
But that's what I can't get used to.
Yeah.
The very first thing they do is, and that's all right, I'm not criticizing them for it. That's all right. They're right sometimes and I'm wrong.
It drives the cost of medicine up very high, I think.
Well, I have no use for hypochondriacs. Real estate.
Right, but the others farmed the land right around the house there? Or, you know?
Well, see, they were too young. But after the father died, then they had to take over. My father had to take over after his father died.
I see.
He didn't want to stay there, but his mother practically begged him to stay and carry on, so he did.
I see.
He had other ideas. He wanted to go in the surveying business and help surveyors and learn to be a surveyor.
Right. So he was a farmer then all of his life?
Yeah, for quite a while, yeah.
Right.
Until he got into politics.
Yeah, oh, that's right, of course.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so in other words, he gave up farming for politics? Or did he have to
No,
farm?
I'll tell you why he gave up farming. He couldn't get the proper help. We had a house on the property, and the man who worked for us and his family lived there. And he was there he worked for us for years. Well, when he died, he had great difficulty getting anybody who would do farm work. They just wouldn't do it.
By
they
that
wouldn't
time,
stay.
people were doing other things.
That's right. The machine age was ahead of us.
I see.
And he just couldn't keep anybody. And we even tried having a man live there in part of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't work out at all. And then grain and food for the animals got so high and everything, and the price of he used to sell a crate of tomatoes. I don't know whether you've ever seen the old-fashioned crate. I don't imagine so, because not many people have. They're about this long and this high, and the slats.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he used to sell those for 75 cents a crate in Yonkers.
Mm. And there were a lot of tomatoes in there, so.
And everyone was white just so, and placed just so.
I see. And so the farming that they did was mostly truck farming, vegetables
Well,
and
he
that sort
took it
of.
into Yonkers, and then in later years, he sold a lot to Ferreras.
I see.
That's how he and Mr. Ferrera got so close, because he sold most all of it to Ferrera.
But we're not the milk that I got, he was all that.
Yes, he sold some of it. Mr. Fisher bought it. Mr. Harold Fisher's father, he had a milk business for a while. He sold it to him for a while, but that didn't work out at all.
Ah, what happened there?
Well, it was in the first place, he had trouble getting anybody to take care of the cows.
I see.
And
Your father did?
He didn't want any part of them.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
see. Right.
He wasn't anxious about it.
How many cows were there, do you know?
I think at one time we had 4.
Mhm.
Not too many. But
So
that didn't work out at all.
I see. But while it was going on, they would put the milk into containers, big containers, and Fisher would take it away and bottle it, or how did they do that?
You know, my father used to take it to him, and then he'd bottle it. Fisher
He would
bottle
put it in bottles
Yeah.
and then take it around. Did he have a milk
Yeah,
wagon?
I guess he did. He would deliver it, yeah. I guess he
see.
did. I really don't know.
Mm-hmm. The reason I'm asking those questions is I'm sort of trying to get at how did people get their supplies?
Well, they had
100
to go
years ago.
mostly horse and carriage or horse and wagon.
And then down to the downtown section where there were stores. Your mother and father where did they get their food from?
Well, my father used to come over to Hastings a lot and get the food there. And when he delivered things in Yonkers, he picked up everything he could get there for the house. You know.
Right.
He even used to go to the ice house and bring these huge cakes of ice
There was an ice house near you over there, wasn't there?
Yeah, but he used to go to Yonkers. When
I
he
see.
sold these things, he'd go, oh, that was a picnic when he came home from there. He had candy. He spent the money as fast as he made it, you know. He never saved money.
Well, these are things that you remember, are they?
Yeah, those are things I remember.
But now,
yeah.
do you remember, was it different before you were born, you know, when he was a boy there?
Well, he spent an awful lot of time in the school. He was up in the Quaker school up in Chappaqua as a boy of around, how old do you think he was then? Around 10 or 11. And from there, he and all the boys and my aunt went there. And then they came home and they went to Pennington Seminary
Where was
in
that?
Jersey.
I see.
And then when they came back, he graduated from Yonkers.
So actually, they were away
They
quite a
were
bit of the
away
time
for a
at
lot,
school.
yeah. Now they must have had somebody, must have had men do the work then, but I wouldn't know who it was.
Right. But now, where did they, in those days, where did they get their food from? Did they come to the stores in Hastings?
Oh, they used to have men come around too in wagons.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
come to, like they had Mr. Hatfield had a bakery, and some of these other people had meat.
I
And
see.
they'd come to the door, you know, and sell it that
I
way.
see. Oh, that's interesting.
And I don't think much of it as I think back now, because look at the way we're so careful today.
Yeah.
And they just put down that tail board and put something down and cut the meat.
Right.
And when you
and
stop
no
to-
refrigeration probably, or
Well,
ice. I
if
guess.
they did, if the ice would be pretty near gone, you know, it would drip from the
Yeah.
inside. By the time they got to your house, it was pretty nearly gone.
And besides that, it must have been all covered with dust and everything because
Well,
the
it was
roads
a
weren't
closed.
paved.
Everything was closed up pretty good with the wagon closed, but
Yeah.
even then, some.
Right.
It wasn't a very healthy way, but we lived through it.
Yeah, I guess it was the fact that it was cooked so thoroughly after.
That might be. Yeah.
Yeah.
But did he have fish too?
Yeah, and then another he had fish too. Yeah, salt fish too. I hope the fish and the meat weren't in the same way. That's all I hope.
Then did you have vegetables or not? You had your own.
No, we had our own garden there. Always had our garden, big or little. We always had it.
Was this common? Do you know
Oh
about
yes.
the other people
Oh
around?
yes.
Everybody
Yeah,
had their
yeah.
vegetable
He'd go
garden?
around all over.
But I mean, everybody grew their own vegetables, or
Well, everybody who had any space, mostly, I
Right.
think, grew them.
and was there a lot of canning in your
Oh,
house? Yeah.
and I even did a lot of it during the war, you know. I
Mhm.
did a lot then.
Right.
But of course, we didn't have the big garden then. Of course, my husband was.
Don't you suppose that your grandmother did it, or your own mother did it?
My mother did a lot
A
of
lot
it.
of it.
Yeah. Grandma got so
Right.
cute. You see, this is what happens in a family like this. My grandmother, she was the head of the family. And she was respected and loved and was the head. Well, then she became a little bit too, it became too much for her to do, to even oversee it. Then my mother took over.
I see.
Well, then when my mother died, then I took over. See, one generation after the other.
Now, when your mother died and your father died, you were there.
Yes.
Was there who else was there?
Jean and my husband and I. And then we had Coach Manny was on our top floor. I had an
Ah.
apartment made. I had to get all this business. See, that apartment was in Yonkers. And I had to get Mr. Duffy, my lawyer, to get me permission to have that.
I see.
That was in 1939 I had that.
I
But of
see.
course she didn't come for years after that.
Mhm.
And but it got to be quite a little difficult to keep it going.
Right. Tell me now, where did you meet your husband?
I met him down at my aunt's in Yonkers. She lived at 248 Hawthorne Avenue, I think it was. 278 Hawthorne Avenue. And we went in to see these folks next door to spend the evening, and he was there.
Uh-huh.
And that's how we met.
He
And
was
then-
a Yonkers
No,
family?
he came from Scarborough.
Oh, I see.
And then after that, we met again at a wedding. And that settled it.
So he had relatives next door to your aunts or friends next door to you?
Yeah, no, he's just neighbors that he knew up in Scarborough, and they had moved to
I
Yonkers,
see.
and he came
Right.
to see them.
I see.
And but after one of the girls in that family was married, he was usher at the wedding,
Uh-huh.
and I went to the wedding, and that's where we renewed our acquaintance, which ended up getting married.
And how many years were you married?
Oh, we was we celebrate our 50th anniversary.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Years.
that's
Yeah.
quite a while.
Well-
What year did he die?
58, I did 58.
But you see, the first year he was in France the whole year.
He was. Oh, was that during the?
Yeah. Yeah,
I see.
1917.
I
He
see.
was in France the whole year. So,
Then when he came back, he moved into Tompkins Avenue.
yeah. Well, we had been there before, of course.
Mhm.
So,
Right. And
and then it got so that I couldn't get out and have my own home because I couldn't leave my father.
yeah.
You see, by the time you think you can get these things, there's a care, and I certainly couldn't leave him.
No, that's right. So what did Mr. Nichols,
Who?
Mr. McNiece, I knew I was saying the wrong
Yeah.
thing and I went blank. What did he do for a living?
He was in the York Central Railroad.
All his life he was a commuter.
He was in the accounting department, and then they sent us out to Michigan for 2 years, and then he became payroll inspector.
I see.
And then after 2 years, the work they did out there didn't come out right, so they sent us back again.
Mm-hmm.
So
He commuted on the Putnam Railroad.
Jean did too when she first went
Yeah.
to work. Yeah.
That was, let's see, so you would have gotten on at what station?
Pier Park.
Pier 5.
It was just about as far, maybe not quite as far. Maybe a little further, but it was down at the station here.
I
It
think
was
it
over
was.
across the other.
It was a more difficult walk.
Uh-huh.
Of course, you had the hill, you know.
Yeah, and then up a little hill there.
Yeah, well,
It was no little hill.
Oh, wait a minute now.
down Hastings, you see.
Yeah.
Went across the parkway down
Yeah.
Railroad Avenue. You know where the Liberty bus people have their depot now? When they
Uh-huh.
store their buses, that's just where the station used to be. Right.
Oh, I see.
And down below it, yeah.
Mhm.
Bicycle.
Well, now, let's see, I think one other thing we should talk about was what was the social life in Hastings
You
like?
mean at that? Oh, you mean
Your parents done that.
some of my parents or
Yes.
grandparents? Well, I think mostly it was in their homes.
Mhm.
They visited each other's homes a great deal, and they did a lot of dancing. And it was a great thing to sing. I'm told they also somebody could play, and they'd have this all get together and sing and dance.
Also played euchre.
Yeah, so they played euchre a
Oh,
lot.
yeah, I know that game. That's a good game.
Euchre. And then they had sleigh riding parties and hay parties. It was a very simple life.
Right, right. And you say picnic?
Oh, sure.
Yes, they had picnics.
4th of July celebration for beer and I think.
What was that?
I didn't like firecrackers. That was all.
A father liked
Well, we
that.
always had a crowd for Thanksgiving and 4th of July. There'd be anywhere from 15 people on. You never knew.
Uh-huh.
See, one of mother's uncles had 5 children. And Billy kept coming out. They used to live in Hastings too, but they moved to New York and eventually they all come trooping out. And any excuse I had.
So what was the uncle's name?
Frederick. And he died. Huh? Yeah, so he was the youngest of the whole family.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Well, did they ever get together any place outside their homes, like at the church fairs or?
Oh yes, yeah. Yeah, we used to have those. Well, of course, I don't want to say that because that makes me think of myself. We're the ones who used to go to the church fairs
Uh-huh.
and things like that. But they were no people to go much out of town.
Yeah.
They were almost all kept within town, and each family, they were almost all from old families around here.
Right. Nobody got very far afield. What about, were there any amusements that came through town, like traveling amusements? Or?
I guess they had traveling salesmen, I don't know.
And they could be amusing.
I don't ever remember a carnival.
What about
I
that
mean,
one?
I'm sure they didn't have men.
They were, no,
No.
they didn't.
We were sort of on the, I don't know, between the Hudson and the, I don't know, the Putnam there. We were sort of by yourself
Isolated,
an
yes.
awful lot, you know.
Uh-huh.
And there was 35 acres we had there.
Right.
And, but they really, I can remember them talking about musicals
Mm-hmm.
and going to each other's houses and
Right. And what did they, in the winter did they use sleds?
sleighs, yeah. They used to
Sleighs.
have horse and sleighs, yeah.
And in the summer it was a horse and wagon.
And then they'd have sleigh riding parties every once in a while.
Uh-huh. Did they do any ice skating or what
Yes,
sports did
yes. And I'm not sure of this, but I know that Uncle Ward Tompkins at one time had a roller skating rink down in Protection Hall, but that was much later than you want.
Yes, I see.
No use of going into that.
Well, just talk about it a little bit anyway. We're not.
Well, he did it. Of course, he was running it for money. Naturally, he ran everything for money, and he succeeded.
So let's
But
see,
Mother used
Protection Hall. Now that's where that's the one next to
Protection Hall upstairs
upstairs
Where
with.
the firehouse in Center
with
Park.
with firehouse.
I see. So they roller skated on
Yeah,
that.
Upstairs.
upstairs.
Hmm. It was a wooden floor. Of course.
Yeah, and my father always said it ruined the floor up there, and they had to put a new floor.
I wouldn't surprise me.
You should explain that Uncle Ward was from Urban Trouble.
Yes, Ward Tompkins. He was my mother's brother.
I see. Right.
He was the oldest of the family. See, they had 6 children. The Tompkins had 3 boys and 3 girls. And Grandma Curry had, well, she lost 2 little girls. Died. And she lost 2 little girls. Yeah. One girl that lived, yeah.
I see. Besides roller skating, do you remember them talking about any other sports? Any baseball?
Ice skating.
Ice
yeah.
skating
Oh, yeah,
and
they
sledding,
did
I
ice-
guess.
It's something in the Solo River.
Right, that's right.
My grandfather had bathhouses built down there for the kids.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
On the
Down
sawmill.
along the Sawmill River, yeah.
Ah.
They had Curry Swimming Hall over there. Even I remember as a kid, all the Uniontown kids used to go down there and scream and holler all the afternoon. They had a wonderful time.
So, what was a little bath? They were just so that they could change their
Just
clothes?
to change their clothes, yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
That was sort of elegant, wasn't
It
it?
was, well, he wanted his children to have everything, and particularly he wanted them to have their education.
Yeah, I see. Well, so there was swimming, and then, do you think they played any baseball or any community games?
I don't know, I imagine the boys did. I suppose the different boys in the neighborhood.
Did you run the horseback riding?
Yeah,
all went horseback
they
riding.
did a lot of horseback riding.
Where on their own horses or?
Oh yeah, they all had their own horses.
I see.
Yeah, that's what they thought happened to my mother's aunt. She used to ride up to Ardsley to see her grandmother, and she rode an awful lot horseback. And they thought,
Pulling on the
I
reins.
didn't think that had anything to do
No.
with it, but they thought so.
Right.
Probably just for having it.
Yeah.
In fact, one of Mother's uncles
Yeah. So I'm sure it's all-
Oh.
I never was allowed to ride horseback for that reason,
Oh,
and we
yeah.
always had horses.
Mhm.
But,
Let's see, what other sports now could we think of that they might have been? Were there ever any expeditions on the river on the boats? Did you ever hear them talk about that? What did they say about the river? Do you remember them
Used to
saying?
go off on the boats once in a while? They must have.
They must have, yeah. Of course, I don't want to get this mixed up to myself. You see,
Yes.
I'm trying to stay clear of my own
Well, we want to hear about you too.
experiences. Well, as far as the river is concerned, it certainly was a busy place.
Uh-huh.
And I used to go up to Kingston to visit, and it was a beautiful trip. And it had an orchestra on the boat, and you had dinner on the boat. They had like a pit bull for the orchestra
Again on the dayline?
Isn't
and the
that
dayline,
marvelous?
and oh, the dinner was delicious. It was the most enjoyable trip up there.
Now, and were you taking the trip for the ride or to go
No,
up to
I
see?
knew somebody up there, and
Right. So
my
it
aunt
was
was up there for
Uh-huh.
she was up there for 2 years, and
Your grandmother, you went up.
one time my grandmother and I
And
went
your
up.
mother too?
My mother didn't go, just my grandmother.
where did you catch the boat?
Yonkers.
I see, it came from New York.
Yeah, and they most all stopped at Yonkers.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Yonkers was a good place at that time.
Mm-hmm. And then after Kingston, it went further along, probably, right?
But you're older,
Went to Albany.
That
yeah.
wasn't the Albany Night Boat, that was much later, I guess, right?
That could have been later, I don't know. Although there
I
was an Albany night boat. I know there was a night boat because when I stayed in Hastings nights, see, I had this aunt in Hastings, my mother's sister, and I stayed over an awful lot overnight. And we used to run around on Tower Ridge, and when the night boat went up, they used to flash the flashlight on us. And
Yes.
we'd all
Yes.
scream and holler and laugh. We thought that was wonderful. We'd break our necks to get
Their
around to that.
pleasures were very innocent.
Yes, right. Well,
They were really almost silly when you stop to think of today's.
Yeah.
They were very simple pleasures.
yes,
I
and
think
that's
you could tell Phyllis, I always thought it was very funny. They do for parties, and those days, ladies could drink. But they had a bar in the back for men, which my grandfather was fenced. And this one woman was teaching New York, and she drank. That was, well,
scandalous.
that was scandalous.
Well, I'll tell you what they did. They had we had 2 living rooms on one side of the house, and then a big hall in the center. And they curtained off the back of the hall, see, and a table there,
I see.
and all the liquor was dispensed out there.
I see.
And Miss Hat, she was the principal of one of the schools in New York, and she was huge, one of these little bit tutu to suit the rest of the ladies.
Uh-huh.
And after she'd go,
They'll talk about it.
oh my, how could she be so kind? And she had a wonderful sense of humor and was a very smart woman. She was way ahead of her time.
Uh-huh. Right. So when the men and women got together like that, did the women stay in one place and the men in the other? Or how
No,
did it work?
no, they didn't. Of course, they moved to our house. They had mostly euchre parties.
Mhm. So
They
they
had a-
all played together.
They had a club, They had
Uh-huh.
3 tables or 4 tables or
I
something.
see.
And they always had a big supper at midnight.
Mm.
My heavens, the food those people ate.
You mean regular like hot
Oh,
meals? Or?
Yeah, yes, like a ham and some, I don't know, baked beans or, or a dish of macaroni or something like that, yeah.
It wasn't just cake and coffee. in
Oh,
those days.
no, not
Well, what
comes.
that gets me to something that you just reminded me of. What were the people like? Were they heavy people? Your grandmother and your grandfather?
Grandmother, well, my grandmother, let's see, here's that picture. Grandmother Curry was quite heavy. Here. This is my grandmother Curry, and that's my grandmother Tompkins.
Oh yeah,
Grandma Curry, Grandma Tompkins.
yeah. Grandmother Tompkins wasn't very heavy.
Grandmother Tompkins.
Hmm.
She's a ramrod.
She was a ramrod.
Grandma Curry, she was a
Oh, look
dear.
at this! It's marvelous.
She was a dear.
They seem to have leg of mutton sleeves on. That's Grandmother
Yeah.
Tompkins.
Yeah.
Well, on the whole, do you think that eating as much as they did, they ate big breakfasts
Oh, yes.
and big lunches,
Yeah.
probably.
And
Big
supper
dinners.
at night.
But they had a very light supper at night as
I
a
see.
rule.
Oh, so their lunches.
They'd have maybe always cold meat and maybe some fried potatoes. They were great for cut up fried potatoes
Mm-hmm.
and tomatoes and cucumbers and things from the farm.
That was their
And
supper.
salad. That was their salad.
Right.
Yeah.
And then on occasions when they were out, then they had another meal. But otherwise, they would go to bed without eating again.
Oh, well, no, sometimes they'd have something for them into bed, too. It
Yeah.
all depended on the person.
I'm trying to get at the fact that was it popular to be heavier in those days?
Well, I think it was. Oh, yes.
Yes.
And by all means.
Because
Yes.
Mom was quite heavy as a girl.
As a
and
girl, I
this
was-
is farm girl,
Where's that picture
Oh,
of
yeah.
me?
Oh.
I'm pretty hefty.
See, they both were in those days. How old were you?
Oh,
About 10?
yeah.
Brother?
Hmm?
Were you about 10 then?
Around about 10 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
You were lovely looking girl.
Yeah, and you were a pretty girl. Huh. You have Tootsie Roll curls.
Yeah.
On Tootsie
Great
Roll.
care was taken with those.
Uh-huh.
My hair's never been curly. You always had to do it up a turn up or down
It's
with
funny
it.
though, Mother Tompkins' side was thin.
Oh, sure. I've never been in it. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful farm.
And that was the
Beautiful
carriage house.
I see.
And we used to
Where you
have the
kept the
carriages.
carriages.
Yeah.
Right. This is.
That's a picture of my husband here, where the horse is trying to get an apple out of his pocket.
Yes, I can see somebody in the background there too.
Probably it's my mother back there. somewhere. Yeah.
Well, we were talking about 100 years ago. What did people think about food and their health? And they
They worried too
probably
much about their health in those days,
they were too busy.
Yeah, they were too busy to worry about it.
Yeah.
When I stop to think of it, I can scarcely remember my grandmother Curry complaining. And of course, Grandmother Tompkins fell and broke her hip. And in those days, they couldn't fix it like they do today. And she sat in a chair for 7 years.
My goodness.
Now-
They couldn't set it in any way?
They tried, and they couldn't.
Do you know where they took her when she broke her hip?
So she was in Brooklyn at the time. I don't know. I think she just stayed home. The doctor came there, and they tried everything, brought everything to the house. Imagine doing that now.
And then you say for 7 years, and then she died? Is that why?
She lived to be 89.
But she was ever after that?
She never walked.
Never walked again.
She had crutches, but she couldn't manage it.
Yeah.
And she was in Brooklyn in the wintertime with another sister of mother's. And in the summertime, they'd get her over to Grand Central, get her on the train, and there was Mr. Parker lived over our way, who had a car, one of the first cars. And he'd meet her here and bring her over to our house, and she'd stay at our place for the summer.
And did she stay downstairs?
Oh, no. She sat upstairs in a chair. And Mother tried to bring her down on the porch, and one day they both fell off the porch.
Oh, boy.
Mother was trying to help her, to get in. And that ended that, so she sat up there. But when you stop to think of it, what a place for a childhood is. All older people, 2 grandmothers, an aunt, and my mother and father. Of course, my father had a wonderful sense of humor. He could be a lot of fun. But some of the rest of them were very staid. And when you stop to think of it, it's...
So wonder you grew up with such a sense of humor yourself.
Well, if you didn't, you wouldn't last long.
But did you get together with the kids in the neighborhood?
Oh, there's no kids. There wasn't another child around there, my dear.
Didn't they walk past the house, say, from Uniontown?
Oh, no. They never did. If they walked any place, they'd walk over to the village.
I see.
And there was one little
Except
girl.
to the swimming hole.
Well, I wasn't allowed down there because the girls would go down. There's only the boys down there. Of course, today it would be different. The girls would go too.
I see, but in those days, the girls didn't go to the swimming hole.
I wasn't allowed down there. Only when nobody else was around.
I see.
Every 4th of July, that was our day. We owned that swimming. It was Curry's swimming hole, and it was a nice sandy bottom. And the whole family, all of us went. Even my grandmother sat on the bank and had her feet in. And I loved the crowd. And here I was an only child.
Yeah, that's sort of unusual. You say it's Curry's swimming hole because they owned the property?
Well, they owned till the middle of the Summer River, they owned it. Their line
see.
went to the middle of the Summer River.
I see.
And they always called it Curry's swimming
I
hole.
see. Yeah.
Of course, if they went on the other half, they were
Somebody else's swimming hole. What about your going to school?
Well, I went to Hastings school. I went to kindergarten there.
At the Fraser?
Yeah.
Right.
Then I went to the first kindergarten, and Millie has that picture, Mrs. Fredericks and Silver High. We stood right beside each other in the kindergarten, but I didn't graduate from high school there. I went as far as the 3rd year, and I was sick.
I see.
I was taken out.
Oh, and so you never went past the 3rd grade?
Third high school.
Third.
Yeah.
I was going to
Lord,
say,
I
you must
hope I
have
got
been
past the 3rd grade.
I was going to say you must have been self-educated because a lot of people were educated through reading. And reading is the best education there is, actually.
Well, I was sick, and
You went through your junior year, but that was it. You didn't get to senior year.
no, I didn't make the senior year at all. I was
see.
taken out. Well, it was a big time. I have said very little about it to anybody, but I had never been vaccinated in kindergarten or any place. My mother had a friend that lost her daughter after she was vaccinated, and they brought this subject up, and they made a terrible time about it. I was half sick anyhow, and my aunt was a doctor. She lived right in the house there with us, and she kept me home, and I never went back, which was not right.
She did vaccinate you.
She vaccinated me, yes, and I fell on the floor. I never fainted in my life. I fell on the floor flat. I fainted, and I was sick. Oh, and I think a good deal of it was all the nervous strain of wanting to do the right thing and not being allowed to do it.
So what was the situation? Everybody in Hastings High
They
School
all
had to be...
They all had been vaccinated, but me.
And it was required.
It was required.
I see.
That started. I wasn't good then anyhow.
What was the matter?
Well, all my life I've had a digestive trouble ever since I was a young
She
person.
probably had what do you call it, appendicitis, no?
Yeah, that time I had appendicitis. I had a mild one.
I see.
But it was such a, you wouldn't do a thing like that today. A kid wouldn't stand for that today.
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes I think they're terrible, and other times I think maybe they're right.
Well, we look at
You know, to
things.
stand up for your.
Yes, they're much more grown up in lots of ways than we all were.
But I'll
growing
never
up.
forget. I never thought about that at all. I never felt it was anything against me at all till I came here, and somebody said to me, "Oh, you never graduated from high school, did you?" I said, "No, I didn't." And I thought, well, that's nothing. Oh, I was in disgrace by the way because I didn't graduate from high school.
It all depends upon which bridge you're looking down off of, right,
Yeah,
Jean?
that's true.
I mean, there's so many famous people in this world that.
Well, look at my Uncle Lord Tompkins. He didn't even graduate from grammar school. Look at the money that man made.
Of course.
He never even graduated from grammar school. Look at Albert Bastido.
Now look at.
He
Who was
didn't
that?
even. Albert Bastido.
Uh-huh.
He only graduated from the grammar school. He never went to high school. Look at the money that man made.
What was his business? I knew Anne, but
Lauren Burnham.
Lord
You know
Burnham.
that? Oh,
she
knew-
was in my class, was she? I don't know. Or she was
She's
older
been
than I.
editing.
Maybe she was in my sister Irene's class. Anne Bastido was the name.
Lauren Burnham.
I see.
See, he was my first cousin too.
Uh-huh.
His mother was. That's the trouble. We're all mixed up.
Interrelated. What's the first thing that you remember in your childhood?
In what way?
Do you? I think almost everybody can think of the first thing, their first memory. But you haven't thought about that.
I haven't given it a. I hadn't thought about it.
I think sometimes those first memories are only that your parents. It was something funny that happened, and your parents told you about it so often that you think you remember it. Yeah.
I only know I swore at my mother. I know that.
You did?
Yeah, if
Uh-oh.
you want to think about that.
What was the occasion for
Oh, I
that?
wanted to go out and I called her a Don Fool and a few other things. Couldn't talk straight. I called her a Don Fool.
How old were you then?
I don't know, but I couldn't talk straight. I had to have somebody go with me, you see. She wouldn't let me go out around alone.
Uh-huh.
And she wasn't ready to go with me, so that was the trouble.
I see.
I don't know. There's too much protection. Too much.
Well, so tell me about your childhood. You played in the house with dolls? Or you
Oh, I
did-
loved them. Oh, I was crazy over the dolls. And then I had to tell folks about the cat. I had
Red cat.
a yellow cat. What do you call those cats?
Red tiger.
You know, red tiger cat.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I loved that cat. So I used to let them do anything with it. I wasn't allowed to maul it, but to love it, yes. So I put the doll's cap and dress on it and put it in the doll carriage and
Wheel it around.
wheel it all around the yard. And that cat just lay there
He
as
did. I think that's
happy as
marvelous.
could be. I remember that. Oh, and that poor cat was killed on the Putnam Railroad.
Oh, my. Oh,
Grandma
that's
said that cat has got good sense.
Yeah, my
a
grandmother
cat that
looked
would
out
go
one
over and
day.
get run over by a train.
Yeah, well, because it laid so quiet,
Yeah.
Grandma said, I don't think that cat has good sense to let that
Cats don't like
child.
to be dressed as a rule.
Yeah, I was surprised. That
I
he
even
was-
put the paws in it.
Oh.
But I didn't tease it. I loved them too much. She was both crazy over cats. She's got a cat. I did.
You had
So-
friends at work together.
Huh?
You had Emma.
Yeah.
Who's
Is
Emma?
it on now?
Yeah. Who's Emma?
Well, the way I had the pleasures I had, if my father came over every morning to Hastings, he would bring a couple of children home to spend the day with us.
Right. That was in the summer, wasn't
In
it?
the summer, yeah. And then we'd play outdoors. And they usually brought Emma Hoyt Williams and Millie and Edith, Millie's sister. He'd bring them
Edith.
over,
Edith too.
Eleanor.
Oh, yes.
That was
And
really
that's Millie's
Uh-huh.
sister.
Yes.
And they'd come over with him in the morning, and then they'd stay for dinner. We'd have dinner, then they'd stay for what we call supper. And then they'd get the carriage, horse and carriage out and take them home.
Okay.
And we usually ended up with my aunt's, my mother's sister for the evening.
I see.
That was the main pleasure I had. He used to bring them quite often.
I see.
And some of them stayed for a day or two.
Mhm.
Emma Williams, Emma Hoyt especially, she stayed quite often.
They probably, when you say you talk about going to Hastings. The first time you said it, it surprised me, but then I realized
You
that,
realize how far out we were.
right,
Yeah.
that Hastings was a little
Yeah.
settlement down by the river, and we were way out in the country, and they probably enjoyed going out to the country to visit.
Yeah. Well, they enjoyed. We enjoyed jumping in the hay up in the barn and all that sort of thing.
Right.
we and then sometimes we wanted anything in the garden, we'd go down and get it and have a party,
Mm-hmm.
have a little supper of our own.
Right.
And we always managed to have a good time.
Tell me, what was their life like living in it? Where did they live?
Well, they lived, Mrs. Emma Hoyt, Mrs. Williams, she lived on what was then Constant Street. There were two houses just alike there, and my aunt lived in one, and Miss Emma Hoyt lived in the next one, and we were very close friends.
What is it?
Our father at the store.
Her father had the hardware store, Hoyt's hardware store.
Oh, and so now, what were the locations of the houses? What's there now? Where those houses
That new store that just opened, little store
Main
just opened
Street?
there.
No,
on Warburton. Used to be Constant Street.
You know where
Yeah.
the Mohice's store was?
Yeah.
They just opened the store.
Oh,
I
no, it was
see.
above that.
It was above that. Oh.
Yeah,
What do you mean by above it?
it was north.
I see.
You know where the garage is? Bob's garage.
Yes.
Well, that was Yugna's place, and it was a big plot of ground. And next to that was these two houses.
I see.
And my
Across from the Catholic Church now? Is it?
Yes, across from the Catholic
I
Church
see.
and south of the
Right.
Bob's garage.
and Emma lived in one, and my aunt lived in the other. Many times I stayed with Emma. That was
I
see,
see.
that's the way we had our good times.
Uh-huh. So now, what was her father? Her father had
He
a
had the
hardware
hardware
store.
store. He's the one that always said it'll be up on the Raleigh.
Oh,
he
yeah.
wouldn't
Never
have
was
to-
either, apparently.
Well, in time it came, but it took a little time.
Well, now, where was the hardware store?
That's down where, almost down where John has a market. Not quite that far. Where the apartments are there. Those brick, old-fashioned brick apartments.
You mean the Hastings House restaurant?
On
No,
Walnut
on
Avenue?
the block below.
Oh,
On the block below that.
Maple Avenue?
No, on Constant
Warburton?
Street,
Oh.
on Warburton Street.
But was sort of where the laundrette is? Or?
Yes,
Oh.
yeah,
All
that's
right.
it.
I
yeah,
see.
Yeah.
Now, can you say approximately what year that would have been?
Well, how old were you then when you met?
Uh,
Is that right?
well, I met her before we ever went to school, so I must have been around 5 or 6 when I met her. Because I
About
must have been
1900?
6 because I didn't go to kindergarten till I was 7.
Oh, I see. Oh,
See, there
Turn
was
of the
always a
century.
difficulty of getting me places.
yes, right.
That was a difficulty.
I want to ask you how you got to school, but before I do that, now the Delanois, what was that family like?
Well, it was Edith and Millie and 2 brothers, Ronald and Curtis.
And where did they live?
Right where Ryla's store is now, Ryla's office is now. They built in front of the house.
So that's on Main Street.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yes.
It was a nice little
across
house
from from that building, the Villard complex.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Right. And what did Mr. Delanois think?
Well, for a while he was ticket agent in the Hastings station. That's how he met his wife.
I see.
And that was a Beaver's Hotel. He was staying at the Beaver's Hotel across the track. And she was a Beaver.
I see.
And, but she was not a well woman for a great many years.
Uh-huh.
And I used to go there. I couldn't understand that the grandmother lived with them, and she did an awful lot. And I couldn't understand why the mother didn't do anything. So one time I went over to my mother and I said, well, I don't understand it. The mother doesn't do anything. So then she explained to me. I said, well, the mother is quite ill.
I see.
So
Right.
that's
So those people, they were the local
yeah,
people that lived in the downtown in the village.
yeah.
And most of the houses in the village were lived in by people that worked around
Yes,
Hastings.
yes,
And then
most
the
of them.
commuters, there were
There
a
were
lot of
some commuters, but not many.
and they were people that had moved out from New York into houses away from the town.
Well, no, some of them. Now you take This is, of course, this is much later. He's young, you know. He lived up here. He was born here in Hastings. And he worked for New York Central. A lot of them worked for New York Central.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, in those days, it quite paid, you know. You got your pass and everything.
Yeah,
It
you
was
paid
worthwhile.
on Shakespeare House.
Yeah.
And, but some of them had the. It seemed to me there was a business. Mr. Barnett had a business of lumber and feed and all that sort of thing. And I think he sold to Mr. Ferguson, who was Edith McConnell's grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, you could get all mixed up, couldn't you?
Why did he sell to Mr. Ferguson?
Well, I guess he was old enough to retire and had made enough money.
Oh, he
for
sold the
himself.
business.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
I
sold
see.
the business,
I
yeah.
see. All right, let's talk about how did you get to school?
They drove me to school every morning.
In the horse and wagon?
Yeah. They had, when we went in a wagon, I got so I wouldn't go in the wagon anymore. Because all the Uniontown boys got in. My father would give anybody a ride.
Uh-huh.
And they'd get in and they'd get to scrapping and get to fighting. And I was afraid they'd kill each other. So I walked
You
from there
walked?
over to school.
That was a long walk.
You
Did you
bet
walk
it
through the
was.
woods, didn't you?
Huh?
Did you walk through the woods?
Yes, and Mother wouldn't let me go through the woods alone. So the Nicholses lived over there at the end of the trolley line, and I used to go there and wait. And my mother would come and meet me there and go through the woods with me.
You go through the woods alone, huh?
She wouldn't let me go through it alone.
So,
In other words, I was a gall darn nuisance.
so there was a trolley line.
Oh, not then, no.
Oh, I
Not
see.
then, no.
Oh.
When did it come? That's Uniontown Park. When did it
Oh,
come?
Lord, I don't know, Jean. I really don't know.
But then somebody had to come and get you at the. How long was your school?
Well, we used to get out around, you mean at the time?
Yeah,
Oh, around 3 o'clock.
I see. Then somebody would come over and get you.
Yeah, no.
Before your aunt. Before your aunt.
When I was little, they did, yeah. Or else I'd go to my aunt's and wait, and then they'd send somebody for me.
I see. That was
No
part of.
school buses in those days.
No, right. How long did it take to make that buggy ride from Tompkins
Oh,
Avenue?
it wasn't too long.
No.
No, it wasn't a bad, it was all right when it wasn't full of kids.
So you went. You would go Tompkins and James Street and High Street, or did you go straight out to Route 9 and up over the hill?
Most of the time we went all the way over to Broadway, and so then you see they put High Street in. I think my father gave that property to put that James Street in,
I see.
and then we'd go that way.
Was Punky Berry a social place then?
Well, I never knew that people thought that we were running a picnic ground there, and I was furious. I went to somebody here about my eyes, and they said they used to go over there to picnics, and the impression seemed to be that we were running a picnic ground over there.
What do you mean by running it? That you were charging for it?
Charging, yeah. And
Oh.
I was furious. And it isn't often that I used to have a terrible temper, but I've learned to control it, and I've learned to keep my mouth shut lots of times. But I let go. And I said, what do you mean? Oh, he said he made plenty. I said, do you know they never paid 1 penny for the use of that property? Until the house, they all built a house, you know. The firemen built it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was all for protection company.
Mm-hmm.
And they all worked to build it. And then when it burned down, there was $300 insurance, and they gave him the $300.
I see. Well, that,
He loved it, and he loved those people.
and they never rebuilt it again.
No.
Was that the end of the Punky Berry Club?
That was the end of it.
Just because there was a fire, but it must have been.
Yes, and it began to be that people, the older people began to go, and the younger people.
Weren't so interested.
I think that what happened, the younger people had a picnic there, and
Yeah.
everybody was using it.
What did they do at the Punky Berry Club?
Well, they used to have clam bakes, shad bakes and clam bakes,
Mm-hmm.
and drink beer.
It was just a gathering place, the club. It wasn't
Yeah,
any.
just twice a year they'd have in the fall a clam bake, in the spring a shad bake.
And in the meantime, the men would just use it as a place to get away. And
Sometimes there wouldn't be anybody there for weeks,
I see.
and unless they went there without permission.
Did
well,
they do
you
any
know.
fishing? Said Punky Berry Fishing Club on it.
Well, they used to go over to New Rochelle and
Oh.
fish, and then sometimes they went down to Sheepshead Bay.
I see.
That's how it
They had
started.
made expeditions.
Yeah, they used to go down there.
Right.
And And then there was a club way down someplace, Wawa Yonder Fishing Club, and the Jackson brothers in Yonkers, they belonged to the club, and they'd invite certain members down, things like that.
Right.
But I was furious.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I mean, they were so sure about it, that it was, well,
A
I said,
money-making proposition.
I said, well, if my father had charged for everything, I'd be a wealthy woman today.
Yes, right. So that's too
But
bad.
it wasn't so much what you say, it's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the use?
Yeah. What were the, were people interested, they weren't interested in tennis. Were people interested in bird watching?
No, I don't
No.
think much.
Those are
No,
occupations
no.
of the
They were
leisurely
too
class.
busy, Phyllis.
That's it.
They had no time to go around, and everybody was busy earning a living, one
Yeah.
way or another.
Did you ever hear any talk about how we're ruining our land, our environment is...
No,
No?
I don't remember.
There
Yeah.
weren't so many people polluted. There weren't so many cars.
Right, you're right. Was there any public transportation besides the railroad? Was there?
Well, only the boats, I guess that's it.
And then...
There's a lot of boat travel.
When did it go?
Well, for a long time, the trolley only came, you remember where Emma Cassidy Inn was?
Yeah.
Would you remember that?
Of
Phyllis?
course.
Well, it came there for a long time and no further.
Yeah.
And we used to walk from our house through Rowley's place, the Rowley place, and get the trolley over there at Warburg.
Right.
Then, when we came home, we'd take a trolley over to Neppahan Station and come up on the Putnam.
Mm-hmm.
And either walk from the Putnam, or if the man was there, he'd come down with a horse and carriage.
So the Putnam, where did the Putnam stop in Yonkers?
Neppahan Avenue.
Yonkers branch, wasn't
It was
it?
no. We went on the Neppahan trolley.
When did they put the Yonkers branch in there?
Oh, I don't know. It was there before, I guess the other one was. And that's all gone, of course, for years. That's been gone.
You know where Grimoire is? This is stop there, too.
That's near Homestead, is it?
Yes, yeah, near Homefield.
Homefield, that's
That
in
would be Gray Oaks.
Oh, that's right. That would be Gray Oaks.
It was the Deer Park, Gray Oaks, Neppahan, Dunwoody,
It's not too
Oh,
far.
yeah.
Myers Square Road goes right over there.
Right, right.
and then they call it Park.
What about, there was this thing called a tally-ho. Did you ever see the
Oh,
tally-ho?
did I?
Yeah,
Oh, boy, was that fun. See, my uncle and his family lived in one of the Draper houses
In Draper Park
in
or
Draper
Washington?
Park, the one nearest the park. See,
I
they're
see.
two family houses. We know
Yes.
about that.
Right.
Well, they lived on the one nearest the park.
Mhm.
And we'd listen for it. And you'd hear it down the road. And he'd stand up there with this great big long, I called it a horn. And then they'd change horses, and we'd all pick flowers and go and sell them to the men, and the men would give them to the ladies.
I see.
Maybe we'd
What,
get
violets
five,
and things
yeah,
like that?
mostly violets. You'd get 5 cents, 10 cents maybe.
Now, where was the place where they changed the horses?
Well, there was a stable there, and there's been a big question as to just exactly where it was. Somebody said that it was where the La Veronica was, but to my recollection, it was a little further south.
Sort of toward the bottom of Olinda. Across, or where the,
A little further, yeah.
Like near Cook's Woods, maybe?
Yeah, no, the other way,
Oh,
south.
south.
near where the apartment house is now?
South of the apartment. South of the,
Washington?
no, the new pop.
Townhouse?
Yeah,
South of that?
yeah, I
So
would say pretty close to it.
pretty close
You know,
to the
there's a
corner
house on the
almost.
corner there.
Yeah, right.
Between that house and that apartment.
I see. Mhm.
And there was a stable there. Well, somebody else said that it was where the La Veronica is, but it was a little further south than
I
that.
see.
To my memory, and somebody else said the same thing.
Do you
We-
ever remember seeing the milestones?
No.
The stones that mark every
No.
mile? No. That's too bad.
Probably knows.
Should have been watching for those, but now we don't,
Yeah,
now we don't know where they are. Or
well,
were.
that's
the-
nothing new. Now, Yonkers, part of Tompkins Avenue is in Yonkers and part is in Hastings.
Mhm.
And they did the road over. And the first thing my father knew, they took the marker away. And he didn't discover it soon enough, and he went down and raised Mary Hill down there. in
What
Yonkers.
marker?
Dividing line.
The dividing line.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
And you never got anywhere with it. Now there's nothing there. to show.
That's the
Only
line.
maps, you got maps, of
Right.
course.
Were you aware of Siggy's Rock at all? You know what Siggy's Rock is now?
What's that?
That's a rock that the Indians, it's there not far from Tompkins on the,
Maybe it's that flat rock you used to talk about.
it's a big, tremendous, and that rock and the Amacassin rock, there was a rock at Amacassin down on the river that they blew up when they put the railroad in. Those two were Indian markers
Oh, for heaven's
that
sake.
marked the
Well,
line.
where is this when you speak of? Just on Tompkins?
No, it's in the Andrus Children's Home property.
Just
You
a
can
minute.
see it, yeah,
Just a minute now.
yeah. Okay, here we come.
Just a minute. Where is this stone?
It's on the Children's Andrus Home
Oh,
property.
children. Fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, because what did you know about it?
Because up at the home, you know, the old folks' home,
Mhm.
Mr. Gushy used to love our woods. He was the manager of the Longview Hotel. I don't suppose you remember that.
Oh, we all have pictures of it.
Well, anyhow, he found a stone that he very much wanted to put up in the clubhouse. They had a clubhouse up there when they had the inn. And so he came to my father and he said, you know, Frank, I'd like to have that stone. He said, what do you take for it? My father said, hell, if you can get it out of there, you can have it. By gosh, you got it out of there, and it's up in the home.
Well,
And
how
I
big
thought you
was
was
it?
talking about that.
Yeah.
No,
I don't know about that big.
I
guess.
see.
But
3 feet in diameter, 2 feet in diameter.
oh, we did 3, yeah.
Mm.
And it's a very irregular. Well, he put it in the clubhouse in the fireplace, you know, to help fill the fireplace. And when they tore the clubhouse down, they put it up in the yard.
I see. So it's still there?
Yeah. Was at least time I haven't been there in a good
Right.
many years. I don't know. I understand the state has taken that over entirely now.
The Anderson?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Pretty much.
I see. What do you remember about Longview? Do you remember people
Oh, I
coming?
loved it up there. We used to go up there. If we had any company from New York, if we wanted to do something a little nice for them, we'd go up there for dinner and eat out on the porch. Oh, that was lovely.
Yeah.
And they had such good food and everything was served so nicely.
And a
I
lot
wouldn't
of
say
the-
it was so swell, but it was nicely done.
At one time, I always had the impression that it was swell, but it wasn't. Right?
Well, I guess maybe it was swell for those times. Of course,
Mhm.
the way they have things now is very different, you know.
What the people would come up there from New York?
I guess they would.
And their
Yes, he
automobiles.
always seemed to have. See, he was connected with the Claremont in New York,
Yeah.
so he had a great many friends that would come out here.
He had 2 beautiful places, didn't he? Claremont was a beautiful on
They're
the river.
beautiful, but this he certainly
Did people spend the night there at Longview?
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know, but
Somebody questioned, was there gambling there at one time?
well, if it was, we never heard about it.
Mm.
I don't know. It could have been.
Uh-huh.
Listen, it could have been right under our nose, and we wouldn't know it.
Right.
Because, as I say, we had 35 acres there with nobody near us.
Mm-hmm. That Longview was a private estate before it became a restaurant, wasn't it?
That Dr. Gashai lived up there that
Yeah.
separated our mother.
Yeah.
But that's a great many years ago. I don't know who had it after that.
That was when your mother was young.
Yeah, that's when
Yeah.
before my mother was married. But I don't know who had it after that. I haven't any idea.
No, I think we probably have documentation or something like that.
It would be rather interesting to know who did have it after that.
And it just went downhill and finally was torn down. Did any of your forebears sign the articles? Well, tell me about the politicians in your life.
I
Maybe
don't
your
know.
father.
I had enough politics to last me the rest of my life.
Uh-huh. Was talked a lot around you?
All the time. And
Yeah.
lots of times I had to help out, too,
Mm-hmm.
in sending out things.
I see.
And,
What was the beginning of your father's political career?
well, at 22, he was a trustee in the village of Hastings. So I slid the other day, and he said I found. And then he was a tax collector for the town of Greenburg. And then he was justice of the peace for the town of Greenburg for I don't know how many years. And also on the board of, up at Tarrytown.
Assessor.
No. can't think. Well, anyhow, he was up there a lot. And the other day I found his resignation when he resigned from the judgeship. He had become too sick to take it anymore. I also found a letter from Village of Ardsley asking him to take the justice of the peace for them as well as the one he had, the Greenberg. And his answer was that he had all he could do to take care of what he had.
So he became...
Oh, we had some great things, I'll tell you. One morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, he could marry people. He had the right.
As a justice of the
Yeah.
peace.
He didn't like to.
One morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, they bang, bang, bang on the door. And my husband went down. And they said, open that door. We want to get married. Well, he says, who do you think's going to marry you? I can't marry you. Well, he says the judge. He says the judge isn't here. Oh, hell, he's there all right, they said. And, they pounded on that door. You have no idea what we went through.
And you, but even isolated as you were, they
Yes,
managed to get
yes.
over there and find you.
Yeah,
right?
so then finally they did go, and the cop told my father next morning, he said, boy, we had some circus with that couple. He says, what couple? He says, I wasn't home. He says, it's a good thing you wasn't because you got yourself in an awful mess. Then one afternoon, a very nice looking couple came and wanted to get married, but they had no license. So
Where did they get the license from?
they had to go up to Judge Leiden and get a license. At that time, he was with them.
Where is that, Tarrytown?
Carrington. They never came back. Nice looking couple.
They got married up there.
I wouldn't be surprised because I think he also had and I know Judge McDowell had the authority to, he loved to marry people. He thought that was great fun.
So how did your father become judge?
He was elected.
And it was judge of what?
Justice of the peace in the town of Greenberg.
And the title was judge.
Judge, yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Then you did a lot of politicking for him. So
I don't know that I did so much outside, but I did an awful lot of inside. And when cards had to be sent out and things like that, that's the way I did. Because see, my mother hated punk. My mother was a very tiring woman. As a matter of fact, I think when they had a dinner for Mr. Reynolds, it's the only time I ever knew her to attend a dinner.
Oh my, that
had no
was
use
for
for-
Mayor Reynolds.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when the municipal building was, they had that when it was all finished, and they had the
Dedication.
dedication. My father was up on with the rest of the trustees. My mother was down in the crowd somewhere, and the sister was with her. She says, "What are you doing here?" Mother says, "Why? What do you mean?" She says, "You ought to be up there with your husband." She says, "What to do? Make a fool of myself?"
She liked to keep out of
She
the
liked to
public.
keep out of it.
At that time, there were. What was the structure of the village like? Were there was a policeman, and that's what I'm trying to get at. Mayor, trustees in the village of Hastings. Did you ever come in contact with any of them?
Yeah.
No.
You mean the policeman?
Oh, he means the way the village is run.
Yeah.
Oh, the way the village is run.
Yeah, who ran it? The mayor? The mayor.
Mostly the mayor and the trustees.
Board of trustees.
Yeah, the mayor and the board of
Didn't have to be
trustees.
like managers, I think.
No, and Mr. Zimser was a long time. He was president or mayor or whatever you called it.
Right.
See, one time it's president, another time it's mayor. You don't know what it.
They keep changing
Yeah.
it around.
But they were all very good.
Oh, did any of your forebears sign the Articles of Incorporation?
I don't think so.
I don't know. I believe it.
No,
No.
1879, my grandfather was 20, I doubt it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That we have a lot of information about that, and probably.
Maybe one of the Tompkinses did, when they were older.
I don't know. Uncle Ward, you mean Uncle Bert? Uncle Bert was actually he was supervisor of the town of Greenberg at one time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Uncle Bert.
So your family was very active in that.
Yeah, they were.
Mhm. Do you recall any stories about people of the village a hundred years ago?
No, I don't think there's many. There was some There's some kind of queries, I guess. I can't, I can't remember the names, because then I won't get in any trouble.
Every town has its crazy name on it. I'm looking at the questionnaire again now, and it asks here, do you have any pictures of family, friends, or the village of the 1875 to 1885 era that
Whatever,
you would be willing to lend for the exhibition?
whatever pictures I had, I think I've already given them.
I see. Right. What about furniture and things
Well,
like
we've
that?
got a lot of old furniture.
How old is that traveling cat?
Oh,
Well, it's when he left Peekskill, so it must be 100 years or more.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather, I'm talking about.
before 1859, because that's
Oh, yeah, so that's really, that's too old, I'm sorry to say. Such a thing as being too
Well,
old.
look,
Right.
Well, I was going to have that fixed over one time, and they told me not to do it. It would
Yeah.
spoil the
Mm-hmm.
antique quality.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, no, you
I
shouldn't
was
have
dying
to.
to shine up those brass nagels in there.
Mhm.
To
That
show
was
it.
probably a very good looking thing when it was made.
Yeah, and see, what people can't understand, these things are put up in the attic, and they're left there year after year after year. And the paper is poor, and they fall apart. I wish you'd see the maps. Poor Vera, she put one of them together, and I guess she really went out of her mind.
that's the kind of thing we get.
That's the kind of thing
Yes.
that Jean gets.
And you have to figure out a
We've
way to
got a
unroll it.
department-
And,
We've got a department that takes care of that, so
yeah. Tell me about some of these pictures now. Who is this?
That's-
fellow?
that's Mother's grandmother Curry.
That's Grandma Curry.
She's our grandmother before this.
So
That's her mother.
This is her mother.
I see. So this really brings up the point of they're not being photographed because there were these itinerant painters, right?
It was a neighbor painted them. Now there's a name for this, and huh?
Well, primitive.
Primitive. That's. I've been trying to. I lived in Michigan. I had this picture in the living room, and this woman came in one day, and she said, "I understand you have some antiques," and I said, "Well, I have a few." And she said, "Well, may I look around?" And I said, "Well, I went to St. Paul. Well, I found my neighbor next door did, so she did." Oh, she said, "You have a primitive." I didn't know what she was talking about. And I said, "Yes, that's my grandmother." She said, "Would you consider selling it?" I said, "By no means." I said, "Perhaps if I had to have something to eat and had no other way to get it, I might sell it then, but otherwise, no."
Did she ever give you a price that she
No,
was paying
I
for?
didn't want any part of it.
That's interesting. But this was actually was a neighbor. It wasn't one of these painters that.
No, this woman was an antique woman. The neighbor had
No,
told
No,
me.
I mean the woman that painted.
Oh no,
the
she was
person.
next door. She lived right next door. She did painting. She painted portraits, but I don't think she was a real, fancy artist or anything like that.
Right.
Oh, it's a lady, huh?
Yeah.
Did you know a lot of people that had their pictures painted? Or know of a lot of people? I should say no.
No. There's very few paintings.
His grandfather to that, but he's up in Uniontown.
We gave it to a cousin.
I see.
He had
Yeah.
bright red hair,
Oh my.
and he was a nice looking man. But
Uh-huh.
we could not have 3 pictures in an apartment.
Yeah. It's overpowered.
And these are the 2 I thought the most of, particularly this one.
Yeah.
Now, if Jean ever goes in a smaller apartment, I don't know what she's going to do with all this stuff, and we got rid of so much before we came here. It just isn't. There's just as much to do away with again.
And we didn't wait for the subject.
Yeah. This is a watercolor of your house up here?
Yeah.
Who did that?
That's his daughter, Betty.
Oh.
She does this, She paints these things.
I
and
see.
Did you know Betty Richards?
Oh yeah.
yeah,
you
well,
did.
she
She did that.
I
yeah.
know.
she does the watercolor. She does it, but she gets $35 and $50 a picture.
My goodness.
Now she's raised her price since she painted that was $35, and that one
She
is
makes
our
these
yard.
houses, people are moving, or people or have churches or all kinds of things.
Now people like that picture.
And she does very well. She
You know Virginia at all?
I see her around here, but I don't see.
How about the
Is there any questions?
What about other people in Hastings, that's what I'm trying to think about is, did you hear your mother and father talking about any of their friends and what they did?
Well, they were great friends of the Beavers, Judge Beavers.
Mm.
And
Where did they live?
they lived in one of those houses near Millie, right next door to Millie, next door to where the real estate office is. They all
Main
lived there
Street.
together. There was Del Noyes, the Beavers, and then a Mrs. Miller who was related to them. They were all related.
I see. And tell us about Judge Beaver.
Well, he and my mother used to go out together. She told me a story once about she was a very poor ice skater, and my father was a beautiful ice skater. But she was a good roller skater, but he was no good at all. So they were in Protection Hall, and she and Mr. Davis were skating. Adolph was skating. So they were having a lovely time. And my father came up the stairs and just stood there and looked at them. And I guess they were getting pretty close then to getting married. And they both fell down. She had more fun
He
about that.
hexed them. And Judge Beavers, how did he earn his living?
Well, he had a grocery store business. He had a good business.
He had the hotel.
Oh, no, that was Charles.
I
That was
see.
Charles'
His brother,
brother.
wasn't it?
That was his brother, yeah.
Mhm.
No, Mr. Beavers had a lovely